Thank you, members and guests. That's much better now. These lectern microphones are working. So now on to the reason that we're all here today for Amanda Lacaze's keynote speech. And I'd like to introduce Tim Power, partner at White & Case, to introduce Amanda to us. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Sally, and good afternoon, everyone. Amanda Lacaze is the CEO and Managing Director of Lynas Rare Earths. Lynas produces rare earth materials which are essential to 21st century technologies and green technologies, including electric vehicles, electronics, and wind turbines. Appointed in June 2014, Amanda successfully led the company through a challenging turnaround, and Lynas is now the only scale producer of separated rare earth materials outside China. Designed from the ground up as an environmentally responsible producer, Lynas is uniquely positioned with its high-grade Tier 1 Mount Weld resource in Western Australia, in-house IP, and a proven processing facility in Malaysia, which is the only rare earth centre of excellence outside of China. As part of the company's Lynas 2025 growth vision, Lynas is building a $500 million rare earths processing facility project in Kalgoorlie and has proposed a rare earths processing facility in the United States. In 2019 and 2021, Amanda was named in the Australian Financial Review magazine's Power List as one of our 10 most powerful corporate leaders. And in 2018, she was recognised as CEO of the Year in miningnews.net awards. Early in her career, Amanda developed deep management and marketing experience, which led to positions across many industries, including telecommunications and agriculture. Amanda is a board member of the Minerals Council of Australia. She's also a member of the Chief Executive Women and the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Members and guests, please welcome Amanda Lacaze to the Melbourne Mining Club. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for welcoming me here today, and I promise I don't believe my own PR. I will start, however, by acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional land of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I also pay my respects to elders from other communities who may be here today, and particularly acknowledge the traditional custodians of Wongatha country in the Eastern Goldfields region of Western Australia, where our people live and work at our Mount Weld mine, and where we are building our new Kalgoorlie rare earths processing facility. As I prepared for today, I took a look at the roll call of previous speakers, and it seemed to me that this is a bit like Kalgoorlie's diggers and dealers, a forum for people who are interested in everything so long as it's mining. But where diggers and dealers feels a bit like speed dating, I'm sure some of you have been there, this appears to be more of a long and languorous love affair. Maybe that's a Melbourne thing. But I am sure that just like in Kalgoorlie, you've been regaled with many presentations which go something like this. High-grade ore body, close to the surface, easy to mine and process. Invest in us, mate, you'll make a lot of money. And the quality of Australia's mineral endowment means that in many cases that has been close to the truth. So at Lynas, we mine and process rare earths. These are reactive metals that are essential for modern manufacturing and green technologies. Our Mount Weld ore body is indeed recognised as a Tier 1 resource, high grade, long life. It's close to the surface. Our open cut mine is only about 300 metres long, 150 metres wide and 60 metres deep. And to put that in perspective, about 100 Mount Welds would fit into the super pit in Kalgoorlie. And our rare earths are very easy to mine. A ripper, a digger and a truck sees the ore move from the pit to the ROM pad. So high grade, close to the surface, easy to extract, a simple recipe for making money. Well, our journey would say, actually not so simple. And if we had only relied on the quality of our resource for our success, I would not be speaking to you today. And I would put to you that that is true for all participants in the minerals industry. So today, I plan to use my time drawing on our experience at Lynas to focus on what we need to do more of in the minerals industry to ensure that we continue to be the powerhouse of the Australian economy. So, our ever-reliable Peter Drucker, in his 2008 edition of Drucker's Management, stated, "An equally important task for top management will be to balance the three dimensions of the corporation as an economic organisation, as a human organisation, and as an increasingly important social organisation. It means a fundamental shift in how leaders think, speak and act in the workplace. Whereas the 20th century economy flourished with an ethos of efficiency and control, accentuated in recent decades by values of self-interest and self-aggrandisement, the economy of the 21st century will require an ethos of imagination, exploration, experiment, discovery and collaboration, driven by a commitment to make a positive change in the world." And I think any of you who are running businesses today would know that we are living this. A single dimension view of our businesses as a purely economic organisation is just not enough. And in the minerals industry, we have some additional challenges which we must address urgently. The Australian Human Rights Commission's 2020 Respect at Work report found that the prevalence of sexual harassment was higher in the mining industry than in the workplace overall. More recently, Rio Tinto's Everyday Respect report revealed unacceptable bullying, sexual harassment, and everyday sexism and racism. While it makes for sobering reading, Rio Tinto's decision to make this report public should be applauded. Following the industry's acknowledgement of the extent of sexual harassment in the minerals industry, my colleagues on the Minerals Council of Australia immediately established a Respect at Work task force in which Lynas participates. And I can attest to the determination of my fellow directors to address these issues. And they must be addressed urgently and not with some vague hand-wringing reflection on culture and the difficulty of changing it. In Lynas, we don't do that. We talk about a concept that has become somewhat unfashionable: duty. It's clear, it encompasses mutual obligation, and it can be discussed with a complete absence of corporate speak. I put it to you that as leaders in the mining industry, we have duties as an industry, duties as companies, and duties as individuals to our various stakeholders: our people, our communities, the environments in which we operate, our customers, governments, and of course to our shareholders. And when we recognise, honour and fulfil those duties, we deliver better outcomes for our businesses and our stakeholders. People talk about mining companies' value in terms of what's in the ground, and whilst that's essential, it's our people who truly build and deliver the value in our companies. Our leadership team at Lynas puts duty to our people first, and it rests on four concepts. Ensuring our people have a job. There is nothing more valuable I can do for our people and their families than to provide them with continued employment. Ensuring our people go home safely every night or at the end of each swing. Ensuring our people can be successful in their work, that they have the skills to be able to do the job we ask them to do. And finally, it is our duty to ensure that our people share in the prosperity when our company is successful. These duties are important in good times, but they're even more important in challenging times. And at Lynas, we have had our fair share of challenges. We are the only company outside China that has successfully stood up and brought to nameplate and beyond a rare earths processing facility in the last 30 years. And that has brought with it technical, financial, political, and more recently, pandemic-related challenges. Honouring our duties to our people has been at the heart of successfully meeting those challenges. It was really hard to meet the first of those duties, continued employment, in the early years when our plant didn't work, market prices were low, and our balance sheet had too much debt. I can see you all being very envious of me having a gift like that. These were the days when I would lie in bed wondering about how to meet payroll, much less fund luxuries like tea and coffee in the staff rooms. However, even in the lean years, we did not retrench our workforce. We looked for other options first. And as so often the case, we found better ways to save money than sacking people. With the help of the whole team, we found ways to improve operational performance and quality production, reducing waste and rework along the way. In the very lean years, and we had some, our leadership team and senior managers voluntarily gave up any notion of salary increases. But every year, we delivered pay rises to our operating teams in line with external conditions. Mining culture in Australia often reflects the boom and bust mining cycle, and one of the most obvious reflections is the tendency for companies to hire people in the good times and fire them in the down cycle. I'm sure there are many people in this room who have experienced this. Who here has ever been retrenched in a mining downturn? And if there are no hands, I know you're not telling the truth. Okay, we've got quite a lot of people who are careless with the truth in the room. So, at Lynas, we are determined not to follow this model. We will not get silly in the good years, and we will stand by our people in the lean years. Of course, no one can guarantee a job for life, but I am beyond proud of how low our low turnover rates and the number of 10-year pins that I am handing out this year in our 10th year of operation. Our second duty to our people is to make sure they go home safely. This is a value shared across the Australian minerals industry, and our industry leads the world. We saw this during the pandemic. The strong safety culture of the industry allowed us to work quickly to adopt new health and hygiene protocols and manage movement restrictions and other challenges as they arose. But of course, safety is not confined to traditional workplace safety. And over the past 2 years, we have seen heightened focus on workplace culture in the mining industry. Some of the personal stories that have been shared, particularly about sexual harassment and sexual assault at remote mine sites, have been confronting and frankly appalling. Like many women of a certain age, which I will never share, I have been on the receiving end of plenty of casual sexism in the workplace and the occasional misplaced hand. But I have never feared for my personal safety in the way many of the women and men who have told their stories have feared. And as employers, as an industry, we are duty-bound to provide a safe workplace for our people and on remote mine sites where people live and work together. It's very easy to blame behaviour on culture and say that culture is hard, but there is no get-out-of-jail-free card here. At Lynas, we have changed FIFO rosters to be more family-friendly and to better manage fatigue. Most importantly, we do not have a shift change day in the middle of our rosters. Any of you who have spent any time on remote sites will know that shift change days are often associated with heavy drinking, and the worst behaviours are often linked to alcohol. The mining industry's approach to safety provides an exemplar case study for how we can successfully change culture by focusing on systems and behaviours, not some fuzzy culture idea. I am confident with the right commitment and approach we can ensure our people work free from harassment and racism. Our third duty to our people relates to acquisition of skills and capability. And this has been a critical part of our success. Remember, no one outside China had successfully built and operated a new rare earths plant in the last 30 years. And guess what? The Chinese weren't all that keen to share their technology. Go figure. So we were built from the ground up to be an ethical and sustainable rare earths producer. And our people have innovated, experimented, invented, they've improved our existing assets, and now we're building our new plant in Kalgoorlie. Lynas has the only rare earths centres of excellence in mining and processing outside of China. And our people are recognised in industry as real experts, and along the way they have developed confidence, pride, and an enormous amount of job satisfaction. Finally, we operate a company-wide bonus structure that ensures our people share our prosperity in the good years. I said at the beginning that duty encompasses a sense of mutual obligation, and at Lynas our people have repaid us in spades. We have a fiercely loyal, engaged and incredibly resilient workforce who have taken every challenge in their stride. Even when we were under constant political attack in Malaysia, we retained 100% of our Malaysian leadership team, our production superintendents, shift supervisors, process engineers, and they, of their own volition, stood up and advocated for our company. Our employees are committed to Lynas because Lynas is committed to them and their careers. And that's why our people choose to stay at Lynas, and it's that loyalty that gives us a distinct competitive advantage. So at Lynas, we feel strongly about our duty to our local communities. Once again, 4 concepts: operating in a way that is safe for our communities, contributing to the economic development and prosperity of our local communities, partnering with local suppliers and education providers to improve capability, and providing support where it is needed, when it is needed, because sometimes people just need a hand. The safety of our local communities is assured through a combination of design and measurement. There are no pathways for emissions from our operations to affect our communities, and we measure everything we do. In Australia, we have a commitment to support regional development, and in Malaysia, we have specific duties as a foreign direct investor, but the principles are the same. We're committed to employing locally, we're committed to buying locally, and we're committed to working with local suppliers to build competent local supply chains. We have formal policies on local procurement, including a commitment to pay premiums for local supply. As many of you would know, we're building a new plant in Kalgoorlie to process our Mount Weld concentrate. It's a big project for us, and I refuse to be cynical or jaded about it. I was there last week and it's so exciting. And we've got all this concrete in the ground, and we've got the kiln on site, and we've got people working, and it's just really cool, guys. But it's a big project for us at approximately 500 million, including associated upgrades at our Malaysian facility. And I am often asked by the analysts if we will deliver the project on time and on budget, given the current cost inflation and labour shortages in WA. At this time, we remain on track, and our commitment to local suppliers is part of our confidence in delivering a successful outcome. We're managing this project ourselves. Remember when that was fashionable rather than outsourcing it? By doing this, we are able to create packages of work that are suitable for small and medium-sized businesses. For example, we can take risks on our balance sheet, for example, fuel costs, which can make a tender accessible to a local firm. It also means we can work with our suppliers to develop capability, even if it is outside their scope initially. The result? We have local Kalgoorlie suppliers providing earthworks, site services, building electrical works, engineering services and more. But there are 2 contracts I want to call out specifically. Our partnership with Olive Branch Enterprises, an Aboriginal registered corporation and locally owned Aboriginal business, and Next Site Kalgoorlie, who are contracted to provide all the PPE uniforms for our Kalgoorlie project. And Indigenous Personnel and Training Proprietary Limited, a locally owned Kalgoorlie business which is working together with Polaris Engineering to construct the process water tank, it's a monster, on site. Whilst this team is still relatively small, this is life-changing work for those involved, and has meant 2 of the team members have been able to move into their own accommodation and live independently, which in turn helps relieve overcrowding. And that is a very satisfying outcome for everyone involved. In Malaysia, 98% of our workforce are Malaysians from our local communities whose incomes are spent in our local communities. So employing locally ensures we share our prosperity and make a positive impact on the communities in which we operate. And the best way to ensure that prosperity continues is to invest in education. This includes sponsoring scholarships in both locations. One example of which I'm really proud is one of our young process engineers, Yasmin. We first started sponsoring Yasmin when she was still at school. We maintained the relationship through university. She did her internship at Lynas and then she joined us. Now she's a process engineer and I got to tell you, she's a real gun. I mean, just great to have in the business. And then sometimes we just need to give. We operate in less advantaged communities, Laverton and Kuantan in Malaysia. And our communities sometimes just need our support, whether it's delivery of food packs in Balloch or building a chook pen in Laverton. We enjoy the support of our communities, and that support delivers significant benefits back to our business. It was no surprise to see environmental considerations, community relations and social licence to operate as 2 of the top 3 risks identified by industry leaders in KPMG's Global Mining Report released this week. Our industry is well aware of the ESG expectations of our stakeholders, and this is even more important for companies like Lynas. We're at the forefront of the low carbon economy as the materials we produce are used in green technologies like electric and hybrid vehicles and wind turbines. In this industry, our duty starts with our approach to our resource. We have this amazing mineral endowment in Australia. We should not high grade our deposits and move on. We should focus on recoveries, not just for the benefit it gives us economically, but because we need to use this valuable non-renewable resource wisely. And we should minimise our footprint, even if we think that we're out in the middle of nowhere where land is plentiful, and we should never start mining without a remediation and closure plan. At Lynas, we want to reduce our emissions, not just because our customers, investors ask us to, but because it's the right thing to do. It's our duty. In 2021, following an extensive review of emissions reductions programs, we made our commitment to the Science Based Targets Initiative. While we are committed to net zero 2050 like other members of the Minerals Council, as a science-based business, it was the people in our business who drove the decision to focus on the more challenging near-term science-based targets with our efforts directed to real reductions, not offsets. Our efforts to reduce Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are centred on making our operations as energy efficient as possible and transitioning to lower carbon sources, including a hybrid power station for Mount Weld, to reduce our reliance on diesel power generation. Last year, we commenced the evaluation of Scope 3 emissions, drawing on data from our life cycle assessments, which evaluate the impacts from mine to finished product. Raw chemical inputs are the most significant contributions to Scope 3 emissions, and our team is working on innovative solutions to reduce chemical use in our processes. As an input to green technologies like hybrid and electric vehicles and emission reduction technologies like catalytic converters, we see the materials we produce having a role to play in Scope 4 or avoided emissions should that become part of carbon accounting in the future. We're optimistic about our ability to respond to the challenges of reducing emissions and our environmental impact. We don't know all the answers yet, but we're confident the same creative and innovative mindset we bring to our business will work for us as we find ways to reduce our environmental footprint. So I've spent a lot of time today, and you probably just saw me looking at my watch, I have 3 more minutes, speaking about our duties to our people, our communities and the environment. And I certainly want to leave time for questions. So suffice to say, we are explicit about our duties to our customers, to be a reliable supplier of quality product, to understand how we can add value to their businesses, and to innovate for growth and improvement. And our duty to government includes creating resilient supply chains and sustainable development. But finally, a few words about our duty to our shareholders, because I know there are a few of you here, at least one that I can see. In the past, this was often the only KPI to measure the success of a company. And I think many of you would know that whilst it was sometimes successful, it often led to unintended and poor consequences, particularly when short-term returns were prioritised over long-term performance and over our duties to people, communities and the environment. As many companies in our industry can attest, non-financial risks have turned out to be financial after all. Skimping on capital can lead to expensive environmental and community incidents. Unconstrained focus on cost cutting can lead to unhelpful staff turnover. And some companies have found the biggest cost of all was reputational damage, despite these initiatives being implemented with the apparent correct purpose of producing shareholder returns. Our duty to our shareholders is to provide them with superior returns, but it is also our duty to behave ethically as we deliver those returns. At Lynas, we have enjoyed considerable success over the past few years, and today our biggest challenge is how to grow fast enough to keep pace with demand. I can't tell you how good that feels after those first few difficult years. And we face the future with confidence that the same values and duties that we embraced in the tough years will serve us well in the future. Oh, and having a Tier 1 rare earths deposit that's close to the surface and easy to mine doesn't hurt either.
Amanda, thank you so much. If it's okay, we're going to take some questions now, and I think we have Richard Shoddy and Sam Street in the room, so I'm just going to keep an eye out for them, and I can see one question over here on the left. We'll start there.
Are you ready for one next? Thank you very much, Amanda. I'm Andrew Shearer from Investigator Resources. Look, thank you very much for a really enlightening talk about some of the sustainable practices, not just for Lynas, but for the industry. I applaud you for the attitude and the taken of not retrenching people during the downturn. I think that's very valuable for retaining IP within a company. What I'd like to talk to you about, ask you on, is more about the gender diversity. Again, I applaud Lynas, who's got a 50-50 sort of ratio at the board level. But as an industry, a lot of our larger companies and your peer companies have targets still at 20 to 30% for diversity. What do you see as some of the opportunities and some of the challenges for achieving what you've been able to achieve?
Okay, thanks for the question. We have 50% diversity at board level. We don't have 50% diversity through the organisation when we talk gender. But the first thing I would say is that we're focused on diversity on more we take more lenses to it than just gender. I mean, we certainly look at ethnic diversity. Somewhere like Malaysia, where we talk about a multiracial community, you know, Malays, Chinese and Indians, we need to make sure that we balance that within our workforce as well. But I think that there are well-proven methods for dealing with this. The first is to just make sure that you get candidates that are more diverse than just, you know, sort of the small cross-section that typically we've employed. And that means you need to be an employer of choice. The second thing is that you need to be a little more creative than, well, you know, I often say to people, you can't blame him, he's a middle-aged man, he has no imagination. And I got to tell you that over the years, I remember the first time I had a conversation with a middle-aged man about whether his executive assistant role could be job shared between two people. And he said, oh no, that couldn't possibly be the case. I need, you know, and it's like, well, of course it can be job shared, you know, it's just a case of job design. And so reimagining some of the issues around the way that we construct work, I think that we see that being particularly relevant as we seek to engage with particularly some of our less advantaged communities, because you can't undo a lifetime's experience in a month. You know, you have to think about how do you bring people in. And then the final thing that I would say is that don't appoint people to roles and then leave them to either sink or swim. And I will use an anecdote on this. In Malaysia, we had not one single woman working in our operating team at the site there. We had some process engineers, but not one technician, operator, or shift supervisor or production superintendent. And so we had this chemical engineer who was working in our quality section doing not much more than administration. And I said, Rosie, how'd you like to go and be a shift supervisor down in product finishing? And she said, sure. And she was really an energetic and capable person. After about 3 months, I noticed that she wasn't herself. And I said, what's up? And she said, nothing. And, you know, I saw her a couple of times and no, nothing's up. So I eventually went down in the workplace and I said, Rosie, I'm just going to follow you around until you tell me what's the problem. So, you know, you can tell me in 5 hours or you can tell me now, but you're going to tell me. And sure enough, she had been bullied. She took me and showed me some graffiti. And I said, well, when you told your boss, what was his response? And she said, oh, he said, well, what did you do to cause that? You may not be surprised to know that he doesn't work at Lynas now, but Rosie does. And it is a perfect example of the fact that if I had not been alert to this and addressed it, and I could address these things pretty quickly, Rosie would have left the company and every man in that company would have said, that's proof that women aren't up to it. So as you think about bringing in new people to the organisation, you need to think about how do you set them up for success. And that's the way you start to create momentum and you become an employer of choice for other people who look like that diverse group. And that's the way you get to build it. I hope that.
Thank you. My name is Loga Chandrakumar, Invest Victoria, over here. Table 28, Amanda. There you go.
Okay.
I stand out in this crowd. Look, firstly, I guess, as a brown man, this is my first mining club lunch, so I don't have a point of reference. But you've set a really high bar, and I look forward to whoever comes after you trying to match this. Firstly, thank you for calling out sexual harassment and racism in a room dominated by white men of a certain age. I really do appreciate that, and it does, you know, speak well for your industry as a whole. My question is a little bit more prosaic. We have an election coming up in Victoria later this year. I'm from Invest Victoria, by the way, I should say that as well. We have an election coming up in Victoria later this year. And what would your advice be to any incoming government of any persuasion if they wanted to grow Victoria's share of the rare earths market?
So the first thing that you have to do is that you have to understand, notwithstanding I was a little bit, sort of flippant on it, you need the resource to start with. So feedstock sources for rare earths can include, sort of hard rock like we have in Mount Weld, but they also can include things like tailings from mineral sands developments. And you do have mineral sands developments here, or potential here in Victoria. So what are the opportunities to set operating frameworks within which companies can be successful? I'm a very big fan of governments investing in infrastructure and policy into which companies can be successful, rather than, things like the sort of idea that we'll all just fund our own transition to renewables or otherwise. So I would say looking at investment and policy settings and understanding the quality of whatever feedstock it is that you have available to you is the thing which will allow you to increase your participation. And the other thing that I have to say is some of my favourite people in the world are in fact white men of a certain age. So please, all of you, don't think I don't love you, because I really, truly do. It's just that I believe that we perform better when we recruit from 100% of the talent pool, not 50%.
Hi, Amanda. Janani Mogan from KPMG and the Melbourne Mining Club. Fantastic injection of humour, and your prioritisation of people in your organisation is commendable as well. You talked about introducing a culture of experimentation within the mining industry, and I'm keen to know, what are you doing within Lynas as an organisation to enable experimentation and calculated risk-taking as well? Thank you.
Thanks. So I think the most powerful weapon in my arsenal on innovation is the word no. So there are patterns in the mining industry that have been learnt over many, many years, so everybody knows you go into an ore body, you go down the grade curve, you have to produce more, you need to build some more tailings dams, and that's just the way that it is. And once again, just as an example, early in my tenure, and we operate on driest country in the world, water is a challenge. And at Mount Weld, not only is water a challenge because we source it from the aquifer within the carbonatite, but we also need really, really clean water for our process. And so, if you come to Mount Weld, we've got ultrafiltration units and reverse osmosis units and DAF units and blah, blah, blah. But the first board meeting I went to, there was a proposal for water management that came to the board for $70 million for Mount Weld. Now, we didn't have $70 million. I think we had 14. And it wasn't an option. And so, my guidance to the team was, you need to think about this again. And one of the key things on that program was that we were going to run out of room in our tailings storage facility by August 2014. Our team went back, they came up with enhanced deposition techniques, they came up with a whole series of initiatives, and in fact we didn't fill that tailings dam until early 2016. And in fact have progressively, as we put other tailings facilities in, been able to move it, to dry it, to move it, to dry it. And so it is still in operation, that first tailings facility. And I can give you a number of different examples like that, but really, saying no, think again. Another one which I just think is really sort of current at present. Once again, Mount Weld is in the middle of Australia. I was going to say nowhere, but no, it's Australia. But you know, where we are, so we're fortunate there are no remarkable species of flora or fauna. We're walk-through country for our Indigenous people. But that doesn't mean that we should just say, well, let's just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you know. And so only about 3 weeks ago, the team came with a particular plan, and I said, I want you to come back and tell me how much you can do within the current footprint. You know, and if that means that we go repurpose equipment or those sorts of things, let's look at doing that. So I think the most valuable tool I have is no, because I have this immense level of confidence in the people in our organisation that when they're asked to really think more laterally, that they have the skills and the capability and the knowledge to come up with just really clever stuff.
We just have time for one last question.
Oh, Amanda, thank you so much for your inspiring address today to the Melbourne Mining Club, Richard Morrow, the chairman. Must applaud the company for its pressing ahead with downstream processing inside Australia. I mean, can you give us a bit of a colour around that and some thoughts about why here and why not here?
Sure. So when I was first appointed to this role, and for years afterwards, I kept being asked, why did you put your processing facility in Malaysia? And I kept saying, well, that predated me. And indeed, when we were looking at how would we grow our business, we thought we would go back to a first principles discussion on this. And essentially what we decided is we have 5 different processing steps that we undertake for the material we take out of the ground at Mount Weld. And it can roughly be split between upstream and downstream processing. We decided it was sensible to have our upstream processing as close to the resource as possible, because you're not shipping unproductive material around, and logistics are expensive, and our downstream as close to the customer as possible, because customers then will visit, and we go back to the question about innovation. You know, you get more innovation in that sort of sense. And so if I had a magic wand, probably the very best place for us to be putting our new facility would be Mount Weld, but we don't have water, we don't have power, we don't have gas, you know, and Kalgoorlie, which is really just down the road, it's only 350 kilometres away, is an excellent alternative. So that was really part of the thinking. Are we challenged by doing this? Absolutely. You know, I mean, we've certainly had over our time many challenges in Malaysia. I have the scars on my back into which salt has been rubbed. You know, I can, as part of that experience politically. But economically, it's been very good for us. We are close to our market, which is primarily in East Asia. It's a low-cost environment. We have suppliers who've co-invested in plants alongside ours in terms of the chemical reagents that we need. And so, you know, we pay our people well, but, you know, we pay an operator in Malaysia 30,000 ringgit a year. I don't think we have anyone on site in Australia at less than $120,000 a year, you know, so that gives you a sense of the difference. So when we think about designing and constructing a plant in Australia, we have to think about how can we upsize it, can we add additional automation, how can we make it more efficient. We would love it if the government would create and support more infrastructure development. A microgrid in Kalgoorlie would just be a blessing, you know, those sorts of things. But it will cost us more to do this in Kalgoorlie than in Malaysia. But there are swings and roundabouts as far as that's concerned, and we are getting a lot of support both from the local community and local government.
Thanks, Amanda. And I'd like to welcome Steve Hunt, Executive Lead Technical from EmCee, to give the vote of thanks today.
Well, I think that was pretty inspiring. I was actually having a bit of a reflection there. Back in about 1989, I was the mine geologist at Granny Smith when it first opened up, and I used to drive out to Mount Weld every week to monitor the bore field, because that was one of those early examples of the company needing to dewater the deposit so they could actually put a box cut in and figure out what was there. So this overnight success has been many decades in the making, and what came to me in that discussion is just the idea that your culture, your business needs and society's needs aren't in conflict at all. In fact, if you don't play that space well, you don't get there, and you need to be aligned and you need to be persistent, because these overnight success stories take a very, very long time, and there are lots of barriers in the way. The reflection about the duty of leaders to lead, to get balanced outcomes, to remember the communities which they are guested in, all these sorts of things. They've become the modern ESG, but they're not modern. We've always had to have good neighbour relationships. And really that idea that you can balance all these things, you can be a world first, you can create a significant company, and you can actually grab some of that downstream processing, which traditionally in Australia we've just tried to strip off the concentrate, that you can actually make it part of your business model. So it's not easy. You've got to have all those bits in alignment. And so, the things I wrote down: persistence, values, respond to the challenges. And I think that was quite an inspiring talk today. You have to you don't know what's going to come around the corner. You've got to be set up well to manage it. So I'd like you to thank me all in thanking Amanda for a great talk today, and plenty in that for us to unpack and have a think about. Thanks very much. Now, safety first, so watch out for the pointy end. Yep.
I love it, thank you.
Thank you.